Caution: this podcast contains adult language, sexual themes, and depictions of violence that some may find triggering. This podcast and its hosts are not responsible for the accuracy of the material presented, as it is strictly based on our own limited research and personal opinions. The information presented is not to be confused with actual investigative files pertaining to the cases or official court and/or law enforcement records and transcripts. What's going on, guys? I want to thank you all for tuning into this motherfucking show. Thank you guys for being consistent even when I'm not. I have people that are still listening. I have new listeners. Shout out to everyone that's been listening throughout this tumultuous, I don't even know how long I've had this podcast, but a minute. And during all these hiatuses and breaks, I come back from them with a new episode, and I've got you guys fully engaged in listening. So I really, really fucking appreciate the shit out of y'all. I want to shout out a new listener. I don't know how new of a listener you are, actually, but someone who wrote me with some story suggestions, some stories that, girl, they're off the chain. I want to shout out Courtney. Thank you for reaching out. We're going to find a way to work those into this season, at least one of them, because, child, the other one is team too much. But, guys, we're talking about a story today that I'm going to say it every episode. It's a doozy, but this is a different kind of doozy, y'all. Today we're going to dip our toe into a world that I have strategically kind of avoided, and that is the world of spirituality, the world of psychics, lions, tigers, bears, possessions, oh my. And we're going to dip our toe into it. Personally, I have a lot of religious trauma, so I really don't have time for all that, but for the sake of sharing these stories, and for the sake of also just kind of seeing two sides of this coin, right? And seeing where everyone lands on if they think it truly is spiritual intervention or divine intervention, or if they think it's bullshit and we think that it's just people. So, people being people. So, we're going to dive into today's story. We're going to hop in a DeLorean, y'all. We are going back to 1977. This is the year that Elvis Presley died. The Emotions, if you know them, they were charting on the Billboard charts. Number one album was Rumors by Fleetwood Mac. Y'all listen, it was a good time for some people. Except for this victim. And so I don't want to make light of their story. Like I said, this is a storytelling podcast. This is one of the, I wouldn't say it's one of the heavier, but it's somewhat heavy. The next two episodes. So, if you are triggered by that type of stuff, if it's a little too dark, we're talking about murder and some things like that, I'll try to be as least little graphic as possible. Like least graphic, how would I say that? As graphic-less as possible with describing what these victims go through, and I don't want to make light of it because it's a very serious situation, but there's a story to be told and a story that shouldn't be forgotten because we want to make sure that, people are aware that crazy shit like this has happened in the past. So let's dive into this fucking episode, and y'all, sit back because honestly, this week, bitch, I can't. Alright, guys, so let's go ahead and dive into today's story. So today's story is centered around a victim whose name is Teresita Basa. She was born in 1929 to a wealthy family in the Philippines. Now, she actually migrated to the United States in the late 1950s as an exchange student. She got a master's degree in music and was a very talented pianist. Now, after some time in the U.S., she ended up going back to school to become a respiratory therapist because I think, at some point you start to realize maybe music is not going to make you the money that you need, or it's harder to get music gigs that are going to pay the rent. So in 1975, around the age of 45, we have Teresita. She is working at Edgewater Hospital here in Chicago, which is crazy. I don't live far from Edgewater at all. So, like, anywhere in Chicago that you live, I feel like you're like 15 to 20 minutes away from every other part of the city if you're like in one of the major neighborhoods. So Edgewater Hospital, which is now closed, she worked there as a respiratory therapist. Her colleagues said that everyone loved her. She was pretty reserved. She was a private person. She was living by herself, and she worked at the hospital, but she was also working on a doctoral thesis in music at Loyola University here in Chicago as well, on the north side, not far from Edgewater. Well, after working there for a few years, on February 21st, 1977, this is when everything takes an unfortunate and fucked up turn. So, Teresita's neighbors in her apartment complex, they called the fire department because of smoke that was filling up the building. The fire department quickly determined that it was coming from Teresita's apartment. So, they break down the door. They get in and they find a burning mattress. Now, underneath the mattress, they find Teresita's dead body with a butcher knife through her chest. Now she is naked and she has this butcher's knife through her chest. She is under this burning mattress and the apartment is completely disheveled. And it seems like this person, whoever was her attacker, was trying to potentially make it look like there was some sort of sexual assault and robbery because when they did the autopsy, they determined there was no evidence of sexual assault. So it started to seem like it was staged and like this person was burning the evidence. They also looked to see what was stolen and like nothing major had been stolen, like none of the expensive things, like, I don't know, a TV might be hard to move, like a television, but they weren't able to find what had been stolen, but the apartment was in complete disarray. They did find a note that was written on a notebook that was, in an area that didn't catch on fire, because I guess the fire didn't get very far, and it said, "Get tickets for AS." So they have no idea what the fuck is going on. So naturally, they end up reaching out to her friends to find out what the fuck is going on. And one of her friends said they talked to her on the phone that night she was killed. And this friend was in a band that apparently Teresita played in. She was the pianist in this band. So this person was talking to her on the phone, and they said they heard she had a knock at the door. And she said she had a visitor who was coming to get tickets for one of her band's shows, for one of their shows, and then she got off the phone. And it didn't seem like there was any, you know, uh, anything going on that was nefarious or anything crazy. It was very like she just got off the phone, like she was expecting this person. Now, I guess another friend also talked to her on the phone that night, and they said in the background they heard a man's voice. And Teresita told her that she had a male visitor who was over, didn't give a name, but was just like, I have a friend over or acquaintance, whatever. She might have thought it was a booty call. She didn't know the front one, trying to be nosy, all her business. But, anyways, this was about an hour before the police department, or excuse me, the fire department was called because of the fire. So, investigators. They talked to her neighbors, they talked to her landlord, and they said that, she was super private. And then they started all kind of sharing these rumors of like things that they like observations they made. Like one person said they saw her fighting with someone who was like a white guy in the lobby like a few weeks before. Someone said that they heard that like someone broke in her house. Like there's just all these like kind of nonsensical, stories that aren't adding up. They're not helping, create a narrative of what happened to Teresita. They're just a bunch of bullshit. People be lying. First of all, let me just tell you, people be lying. They be making stuff up. People like to feel involved or feel like they saw something. So the cops have no fucking idea what happened. And think about it. It's 1977. They didn't have surveillance cameras in this building, and um, yeah, I mean, they couldn't ping someone's cell phone or do any of that shit that they could do. I don't know if that would help, but whatever. It was harder to figure shit out. So the case went cold for 6 months. Now, this is until the summer of 1977 when shit warmed up, literally outside and in this case. This is when a detective by the name of Joe Staccola, he got a call from a neighboring police department that I think changed his life and just honestly was a game changer. This is when we enter a doctor named Jose Chua who worked with Teresita at the hospital. His wife, Dr. Jose Chua's wife, was also a respiratory specialist at the same hospital in Edgewater with Teresita and with Dr. Jose Chua. Now, Dr. Jose, he worked in his own department. But Teresita and Dr. Jose Chua's wife, whose name is Remy Bias, Remy Bias, which I'm gonna call her Remy Ma, first of all. R to the easy, M to the whiz eye. Remy Ma, she worked in the same department with Teresita, but they didn't really know each other. I think they probably worked like opposite shifts or something like that. So Dr. Jose Chua gets on the phone with Joe, the detective, and is like, bruh, I have a story for you. I got to tell you something about this case. We need to link the fuck up. So the detectives go to this couple's house, which it's a big, beautiful house. He's a doctor. This was like a change for the detective because they're like, why are we in like this like fancy ass like house, to talk about this case that, this murder case. Um, but whatever. He's like, I'm game for it. Long story short, they sit down, and this is when the doctor says to the detective, she's like, and I'm paraphrasing here, it's like, bruh, do you believe in magic? Like, do you believe in supernatural fucking shit? And the detective's like, I mean, I'm open to any details that can help us close a case, which is his way of being like, bitch, no, but I'm going to listen because if you fucking slip up and some details come out, like, it's going down. And I just want to make sure that I am lifting every stone to figure out what is going on. So, this is when the doctor starts telling him a story about his wife. So, we got to talk about Remy Ma. So, Remy Ma had actually been fired from the hospital for what they said was insubordination. Apparently, after Teresita's death, Remy Ma started impersonating Teresita and started acting like her, started to speak like her, started using her locker, sat where she ate lunch, was basically like sliding into this woman's persona, this dead woman's persona. And her coworkers, Teresita's coworkers, were weirded the fuck out. They were like, bitch, nah. So they confronted her and they were like, bruh, like, what are you doing? This is fucking weird. This is disrespectful. Like, what is wrong with you? And I guess Remy Ma was just like, acted brand new. Like, ripped me out the plastic. She's acting brand new. She didn't know what was going on. She's like, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, I'm normal. Like, I'm behaving normally. Like, y'all need to fall back. So she continued acting out of pocket. And this is when the coworkers went to management and they were like, listen, y'all need to do something because this is out of control. And so management confronted her. She acted once again, ripped me out the plastic, brand new. So what they ended up doing is firing her because she would not stop, creeping everybody the fuck out by acting like Teresita at work. So the day she got fired, she went home. She told her husband, she didn't say like, oh, I got fired for acting like a weird ass fucking person. She was just like, um, my department had to do some layoffs, which is interesting that like her husband was a doctor at the hospital and didn't know that, but different departments, I don't know how hospitals work, especially not in the 70s, so I don't know. There was no internet. I don't know, maybe news just traveled very slowly, so he believed her. Well, she went to go lay down for a nap that night, and he walked in to check on his wife in the room. And this chick was having a fucking full on exorcist moment. Her eyes were rolled back in her fucking head. And she started speaking in Tagalog, which was their language in the Philippines. However, they never spoke that at home. Like, they spoke English at home. And I guess they were from different parts of the Philippines, so like their regional dialects were a little different. So he's like, what the fuck? So she's speaking Tagalog, right? And she's speaking it with a Spanish accent, which is the same accent Teresita had. And she says to her husband, she's like, my name is Teresita Basa. Her voice is different. It's like this lower, different voice. And she's like, my name is Teresita. She's like, yo, like, I was murdered and I need your help to capture the person who murdered me. Mind you, it's his fucking wife saying this, which I'm sorry. My husband sometimes talks in his sleep, and the sentences aren't really like, I can't really understand them, or he'll start laughing in his sleep. Like, it probably happens like maybe once every like 3 months or so, and it's like 2 seconds and it's over. If that ninja started literally speaking to me as a dead person through, I'm sorry, that shit was not a part of the vows, and I'm gonna stick through that. So he's just like, what the fuck? He's freaked out, and he starts asking her questions to see if she's having like some sort of medical emergency because he's a doctor. He's like, this bitch done bumped her head. Does she have a concussion? Is she having like a stroke? Like, what is going on? And this is when she just snaps out of it. And when she falls back asleep and then wakes up, she has no recollection of what happened. So her husband is like, bitch, do you know what the fuck happened? What the fuck went down? And it's funny because I'll tell my husband, like, bruh, the shit you were saying in your sleep, like, you were just like, the sentences weren't making sense. And he's like, what? He doesn't remember. But this lady, it wasn't just talking in her sleep. She got up and, with her eyes rolled back in her head, said she was her dead coworker. Anyways, somehow the husband, he just like, I'm leaving this alone. He went to work, he talked to some of his coworkers and was like, I guess they were close enough for this. He was like, what the fuck should I do? And they were like, bitch, don't say shit. Like, you are a respected doctor. Like, people are gonna look at you like you're gonna be discredited. They're gonna be like, you are out of your mind. Because he's like, okay. So he was just quiet, left it alone. Well, it happens again 2 days later. And she's just like, bruh, I told you I wanted your help. And like, I feel like you're not helping me. Like, his wife, mind you, is like having this possession, this possessed spirit talk through her. She's like, you were supposed to help me. She gives him the name of the person who murdered her. Actually, she gave him the name of the person that murdered her the first time. He left it alone and was like, I'm not dealing with this. So the second time, she's like, I gave you a name. You didn't go to the police. What the fuck? Sorry, guys, about that detail I left out. She gives him the name Alan Showery. So the husband's like, I don't fucking know this name, but now this ghost is mad at me. And this time the ghost is like, well, how about this? The ghost speaking through his wife is like, how about this? I'm gonna give you more details and take these details and go to the fucking police. So he's just like, what? So she's like, all right. So I gave you the name Alan Showery. Alan was my coworker, mind you. She's speaking through Teresita. She's like, he was my coworker and acquaintance. He was supposed to go to my house and fix my TV for me, but instead, he knocked me unconscious, stabbed me with a fucking butcher's knife, fucked up my shit in my apartment, and stole my expensive family heirloom jewelry. And then he set my apartment on fire and put my ass under a mattress. So he's just looking at his wife like, bruh, what the fuck? So then through this possession, she also revealed that Alan had a girlfriend who he gave the jewelry to. And then to make this plot thicker than a Snicker, thicker than a BBL, the ghost proceeds to speak through the wife and lists off 4 relatives of Teresita who would be able to verify that the jewelry belonged to Teresita once they tracked it down. So this is when the husband's like, bruh, this is too much. So this is when he reaches out to the detectives. And honestly, it was a cold case. They had nothing to fucking go on. So of course they're like, I don't got nothing else to do. We have nowhere else to turn with this case. Let's look into it. Now, once he told the police the name Alan Showery, they were like, hold up. That notepad had the initials AS on it. So they do some research. They take that name, Alan Showery, they look into it, and they discover that he indeed did work in the hospital, but just in a different department. So obviously, the doctor doesn't know who the fuck he is. I guess he was an orderly or something. And this is when they start asking around other coworkers, and several of them were like, oh yeah, we knew that Teresita was cool with Alan, and he was going to go help her fix her TV. Yeah, we all knew that, common knowledge, which is also kind of like, none of y'all said, like, no one spoke up. But I also did a little more research and heard that people were freaked out by this guy and a little scared, like they were a little put off by him. So I'm thinking maybe they were just too nervous to come forward. But no one said anything until the police questioned them. They're like, oh yeah, he was supposed to fix her TV. I don't know if it was that night, but I think it was that night, whatever. So this, is corroborating with, that story that this ghost bitch just gave. So police run a background check on Alan, and they find out that he's been arrested for sexual assault and robbery, but he was never actually convicted, which is crazy. So we have all these fingers that are pointing at Alan, including initials in a notebook. We have this random ass ghost story from the doctor's wife who worked at the hospital, who is possessed by Teresita's ghost, which this is just a circus, right? So the police go to Alan's house to talk to him, and they show up to his home, and there he is with his girlfriend. The first thing they notice is that his girlfriend is wearing a ring that matches the description that the ghost gave them, because apparently the ghost Remy Ma, the ghost that was in Remy Ma, told them to lean back first of all, and then told them what the jewelry looked like. So they see that on the guy's girlfriend, and they're just like, let's just leave this alone. We're gonna double back to it. So they talk to Alan, and they're like, so you are a person of interest in this crime, and Alan agrees to go to the police station for questioning. First, he tells them that he'd never been at Teresita's house before, but he is willing to go in for questioning. So they bring him in, and they're also going to question his girlfriend, but they question them separately. So they tell Alan, they have him alone, and they tell him that they know about him going to the fact that he was supposed to go to Teresita's house to fix her TV. And this is when he admits to going to her house to fix her TV, but says he wasn't able to fix it and ended up going straight back home to his girlfriend to help her fix an electrical issue at their house. Well, this is why when they went to the other room and they are interrogating the girlfriend and they ask her, they're like, so, was there any issue in your apartment with like the electric? And she's like, hell no, there wasn't anything. She's like, I know what you're talking about. So that's lie number one, which I'm also like, girl, get your alibis together. Alan, not the girlfriend, Alan, get your alibis together. But this is when they move right into lie number two, when they ask the girlfriend if she's received any new jewelry from Alan. And she's like, yeah, in February, he gave me some jewelry as a late Christmas present. Well, bitch, hello. February is when the murder fucking happened. So it's all coming together. It's all coming back to me now. My Celine Dion voice. Everybody's putting the pieces together, and the stars are starting to align. So this is when they ask the girlfriend to show them the jewelry. They need the jewelry. So she does. And they take photos of the jewelry and they reach out to that list of Teresita's family members that Remy Ma gave them while she was in her trance, and they reach out to those people. And the family sees the jewelry and is like, bitch, those are our fucking family jewels. That's our fucking family heirloom shit. Like, family jewels, no pun intended. But they're like, that is our heirloom. Like, that is our shit. Like, it matches the description. Like, that's our stuff. And this is when they confronted Alan. And he cracked like a fucking egg. And he confessed. So he confessed, and basically he said that Teresita was super generous towards him, which is why, like, this shit makes me not even want to be fucking nice to people. She was really nice towards him, and, like, she would ask him for favors or, like, help out with, like, whatever here and there, and she would tip him really well when he would do these little odd jobs, which is probably another reason why people didn't think twice about, now that I'm thinking about it, why people didn't think twice about him going to fix the TV and think of him as the murderer, because they knew, like, this is what they do. Like, they link up and, like, he will do stuff for her. I guess he was also, she was also supposed to get him tickets for her show, which is just fucked up and like just wild. So Alan is just, ooh, bitch. I was like, what was that? Sorry, it was a motorcycle. So Alan is just spilling all the beans, and he tells the police that he only meant to rob her that night. But I think something went wrong. He snapped and he ended up killing her. And so at that point, he was like, fuck, I gotta stage this shit. So he stripped her down and made it look like a sexual assault. And that's why when they ran the autopsy, they were like, there's no evidence of sexual assault because there wasn't. So I guess he had stabbed her already with the fucking butcher knife in the chest, which, bitch, bruh, really? And then that's when he threw her under the mattress and set that shit on fire. Apparently, he did all this shit. This Negro did all of this shit and only found $30 on her. All this shit for $30. You can't buy shit with I mean, maybe in the 70s you could buy some shit with $30, but uh, really? $30 and some jewelry that you stole and you didn't even pawn the shit. You gave it to your girlfriend. Which I mean, if I'm sorry, if you went through all that and murdered somebody, had to like stage a crime scene and do all this shit, ain't no fucking way I'm gonna take the jewelry and just hand it off and just take my $30 as in like, okay, this was enough payment for the PTSD I just gave myself. This is how you know like this man was not well. So in January of 1979, this is when Allen goes to trial 2 years later. Now, this is a big ass case. There are headlines everywhere because everyone's just like, this ghost came back, possessed this bitch, and literally exposed the man who killed her. So it's just like very much that Lindsay Lohan movie, not the premise, but the name, I Know Who Killed Me. It's giving that. So everyone's talking about it. And this is also when, once this goes to trial, Allen switches his plea to not guilty and says the police pressured him into giving them a confession by saying they were going to arrest his girlfriend, etc., etc. Which I'm sitting here like, okay, not to say police have never pressured somebody into a confession, because let's call a thing a thing. But I'm also like, the math ain't mathing, my friend. So the case goes to trial, and the jury is deadlocked because they half of them is just like, we believe it, the other half is just like, we don't. So they declared a mistrial, and they actually scheduled a further out date to go back to trial. Well, a few weeks later, as they prepared for the second trial, Alan snapped again and reconfessed to the murder. So they didn't have to go to trial. They're just like, okay, well, he confessed. Like, it is what it is. Like, they didn't have to do like this whole shit. They're like, well, you said you did it again, so we're good. Tell me why. They sentenced this man to 14 years in jail for murder, and he had a few additional sentences for robbery and arson. Do you want to know how much time he actually ended up serving? Do we want to know about what he served, y'all? Because you got served. He served 4 years and was released. So, yeah, that's literally the end of the story. How fucking wild is that? 4 years and he was released. So, I don't know. No one knows his whereabouts, like where this man is today. But he ain't in jail, so we know that much. Yeah, I. So I have a. I'm sitting here like I already knew the story because I had to write this damn script. But even at the end, like just hearing it again and thinking about it, just from this objective point of like a narrator, I'm just a little shook for several reasons, right? Obviously, we already know like the justice system has been nothing but trash for us black men, so we know that much. It's just crazy that this black man only got 14 years for this heinous crime, and maybe it's because of the details were so foggy. But you got two confessions out of this man. You got his name on a notepad at the scene of the crime. You got him, you know, confessing to go do her TV. You got the jewelry on his fucking girlfriend. I think without the jewelry on his girlfriend, I would have maybe considered the possibility that he was set up, right? But the confessions, number one, the fact that the girlfriend, he had no alibi and that he was lying. The fact that his girlfriend was wearing the jewelry that was stolen. But what gets me now is I just don't understand Remy Ma, right? The fact that she didn't know Teresita well, how did she know all these details, right? So there's a few different theories that come to mind, right? Number one is that this shit is legit, right? And this ghost really did jump up in her body and tell her, Molly, you in danger, girl. And the ghost of Teresita really did solve her own crime, right? I'm sure that some people believe that. That's not my ministry. That's not my, area of supernatural is not something that I really um, dabble in as far as like believing that shit. But if we take a non supernatural route, right? The first theory is that Remy Ma obviously like she heard Alan talking about it. She overheard because they did work together. She knew those details from what she heard from him, and she, was freaked out by him, a little weirded out. Didn't want him to think that she was ratting him out, so she decided to take this route of being like, I'm possessed. It's not really me. It's Teresita's ghost speaking through me to, uh, share those details with the police. Or some people are saying that maybe she was involved with it and she got pulled out. But I just feel like if she was, like, Alan would have thrown her under the bus at some point. Also, she was wealthy and already had, money, so she didn't need that. Um, Maybe she wanted more hours at work. I don't know. They were in the same position. Maybe she was just like, I want the day shift. I don't know what there could have been what could have been a true motivation for her to ever do that. So like, that's not something that I believe. That's something I've just seen floating around on the internet. I truly believe that it makes more sense to me that she overheard or somehow discovered all of these details from Alan. I mean, not every criminal is smooth. They're all not. We all can't be Michael Jackson. Not all of us are smooth criminals. So maybe she found out these details, overheard a phone call, anything that could have happened, and this was her way of bringing it to the police's attention without having to, you know, maybe this is the way that she felt the most safe, and bringing all that to the police. Either way, I want to know what y'all think. If you're listening to this podcast on Spotify, first of all, I apologize for the audio not being as good. I promise my mic does not sound that shitty when you listen on iTunes. But if you're listening on Spotify, one of the cool things about that is you can actually, I'll put like a little Q&A thing in there where you can ask, I'm going to ask you guys, what do you think of the episode? And you can comment through Spotify, like what you really thought about it. So you can do it there, or you can go on Instagram and follow at Bitch I Can't Pod, and you can message me and tell me what the fuck you thought. Or I'll be posting some pictures of, some things from this crime. I try to do that with every episode, post a little snippet, with a little trailer, but also with some behind the scenes stuff I can throw on. Go in, comment, let me know what you think. I am literally dying to know I need some other opinions on this, because I've been sitting with this by myself, and I'm just like, somebody needs to tell me what they think, because I have my thoughts, but I want to know. So I want to thank you guys again for listening to the show. It means so much. You already know life is tough out here. As an adult, adulting is not easy. Anxiety, depression, all these things happen. Mental health is very important, but we all be going through it sometimes. And so for me, I have to pull back on things, and talking about dead people and crimes and shit is one of the areas that I pull back in when I'm feeling like a little spiral notebook, when I'm not doing well, when my anxiety's higher, I'm at a high stress. Like, I usually will pull back from this first. That's why, one of the reasons why I'm not, pushing myself to like, oh my God, we got to do 1,000,000 episodes. Like, we're going to do them as long as it feels good and it feels fun for me. So just a little insight there. But thank y'all for listening, and tell a friend. If you want to go on and rate and review the show, you can rate it on iTunes or Apple Podcasts, rather. I'm so old school. I'm like, iTunes. No, on Apple Podcasts, you can rate the show, tell a friend, and thank you so much for listening. We got more episodes coming on the way, and have a good one. Bye.